A flight attendant refused to let a black family board the plane. Then they made a phone call and the flight was stopped. They walked up to the gate calm and respectful, holding first-class tickets and a small gift for their grandmother. But the flight attendant didn't even glance at them a second time. She told them to step aside, saying they shouldn't board first, and blocked their way without even checking once. The mother stayed silent. The kids tried to hold back tears, but the father only spoke 5 gentle words. "I'm going to make a call." No yelling, no fuss, just that one statement. A few minutes later, the plane stopped boarding. The captain came out and the woman thought maybe the one in charge might actually be the one being escorted out. Before we begin the story, comment below and tell us which channel you're watching from today. And if you like stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a new story. She stood behind the gate counter with a stiff smile and an even stiffer posture. Sarah Coleman had worked at this airline long enough to think she knew exactly who deserved to sit first class and who didn't. She scanned each ticket like she was doing someone a favor, barely glancing at the passengers before waving them through. Then a family approached. 4 well-dressed black passengers, silent, respectful, and calm. Mr. Stephen, the father, wore a navy wool jacket and carried a fancy briefcase. His wife, Teresa, wrapped a soft cashmere scarf around her shoulders and held a small yellow gift bag. Their son, Daniel, about 15 years old, stood tall and quiet, while their youngest daughter, Alana, hugged her backpack tightly and looked around curiously, one hand holding her mother's. Stephen nodded politely and handed over the boarding passes. Clara looked at them, then at the family, and her smile grew wider. She returned the tickets without scanning a single one. "Economy is boarding at gate 6, she said, pointing toward the end of the terminal. Teresa frowned slightly. "These are first-class tickets." Clara blinked slowly. "I'm sure, but there must be a mistake. First class is for elite customers only." Stephen didn't flinch. "We're platinum members. Please scan our boarding passes." Clara hesitated, then took a ticket and scanned it. A green light beeped. Yes, she scanned another ticket. Same result. Her face didn't change. "Maybe the system is malfunctioning," she said quickly. "Sometimes it reads the info wrong. You'll have to wait here while we confirm it." Alana looked at her mother, confused. "Why can't we get on?" she asked softly. Teresa bent down beside her daughter, stroking her hair. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just hold on to the gift. It's fine." Stephen stood still, jaw clenched slightly, but his voice stayed calm. "There's nothing to confirm. Our seats are valid. You already scanned them." Clara crossed her arms. "Sir, I'm asking you to step aside so I can complete the boarding process." "No," Stephen said firmly. "You're refusing us without any reason." People in line started shifting uncomfortably. A businessman behind them pretended to check his phone, but didn't really. "Look away," a woman in the distance whispers to her companion, glancing toward the gate. Clara leans forward slightly. "If you make this harder than it needs to be, you won't get anywhere." Stephen pulls out his phone without saying a word, steps aside and dials. He speaks quietly. "Yes, there's a situation. Gate 4. She's refusing to board without cause." "Yes. All 4 tickets have been scanned. No explanation." "There's a situation. Gate 4. She's refusing to board for no reason." "Yes, all 4 tickets were scanned. No explanation." Clara scoffs loud enough for those around her to hear. Of course, there's always a phone call. She rolls her eyes and turns away. Then the doorbell rings. Nearby, the young agent Ryan Mitchell picks it up. His posture shifts. "Yes, sir. Yes, I understand." He hangs up and quickly walks toward Clara. "You need to stop the boarding," he whispers. His posture changes. "Yes, sir. Yes, I understand." He hangs up and quickly approaches Clara. "You need to stop the boarding," he whispers. Clara blinks. "What are you talking about?" "The supervisor is coming," he says, to hold the flight. Boarding stops. The line freezes. The soft chatter around gate 4 suddenly feels miles away. The family doesn't move. They stand quietly together. No one speaks. No one argues. They just wait. And with every passing second, every watchful gaze, every uneasy whisper makes it clear something bigger is about to happen. The silence around gate 4 grows heavier by the second. Clara's face flushes with embarrassment, but she stays put. She turns to Ryan Mitchell, her voice low and sharp. "You don't take orders from a passenger's phone call." Ryan Mitchell doesn't answer. His eyes stay fixed on the far end of the jet bridge where two figures have just appeared. One wears a dark blue suit, the other a red striped jacket from the airport operations team. Passengers start to shift again. Some step aside for a clearer view. They move again. Some step aside for a better look. Others whisper openly. A woman pulls out her phone pretending to check messages but is actually recording. Clara straightens up, a smile brightening her face like armor as the two men approach. The man in the suit walks calmly, cautiously. His badge reads David Thompson, Regional Flight Director. He walks with calm, careful steps. The red striped jacket belongs to Carlos Rivera, the airline's ground supervisor. Neither of them smiles. Clara Henry says, his tone measured. "Step away from the counter." Clara hesitates. "Sir, there's been a mistake. This family tried to board first class." Henry raises a hand. "Have you checked their tickets?" She pauses, realizing her answer matters more than she thought. "Yes, two of them." But Louise interrupts her. "Are they valid?" Clara reluctantly nods. "They scanned green, but I think Henry saw them." More than she thought. "Yes, two of them." But Louise cut her off. "Are they valid?" Clara reluctantly nods. "They scanned green, but I think Henry saw." She turns toward the family still standing quietly just a few steps away. He looks back at Clara. "You misunderstood." He steps up to the podium, opens the passenger list and taps the screen. Ryan Mitchell steps beside him, pointing at the names. Stephen, Teresa Daniel, and Sophie Harris, all listed under Priority Elite. 4 seats confirmed from 1A to 1D. Clara's mouth drops open, speechless. Louise turns to Ryan Mitchell. "Start it. Let them go through first." Ryan Mitchell nods quickly. "Yes, sir." As the gate doors open and boarding resumes, Clara stands frozen behind them. Her authority stripped away in front of everyone, without yelling, without arguing, without reacting. Stephen nods slightly as Ryan Mitchell welcomes the family forward. Teresa gently leads Alana, the girl still clutching her golden gift bag. Daniel follows closely, one hand smoothing his coat instinctively. As they pass Clara, no one looks at her, not once. As they pass Clara, no one looks her way, not even once. But the weight of their silence presses heavier than anything she's heard all day. Clara's heart pounds. The emptiness inside her deepens. And as that family disappears, through the jet bridge, she feels something she hasn't felt in years. Uncertainty. Something's off. Something bigger than a mistake just happened. And the worst part is she doesn't know who was on the other end of that call. But whoever it was, they controlled everything. Inside, the plane, the crew just finished prepping first class. The cabin smells of fresh linen and citrus cleaner. Flight attendants adjust pillows and put on headsets, moving quickly before the rest of the passengers arrive. Everything seems normal until the jet bridge door opens, and Ryan Mitchell steps in, leading the Moore family forward. Stephen quietly follows, guiding the family into the cabin. Teresa walks behind him, holding Alana's hand, while Daniel strides steadily, his eyes scanning polished wood and white leather seats. They stow their bags in the overhead bins without help. No questions, no fuss. They simply take their seats from 1A to 1D as usual. Lead flight attendant Ryan Mitchell walked in, leading the Moore family forward. Stephen quietly guided his family into the cabin. Teresa followed behind him, holding Alana's hand, while Daniel walked confidently, his eyes scanning the polished wood and white leather seats. They placed their luggage in the overhead compartment without needing any help. No questions, no fuss. They simply took their seats from 1A to 1D as usual. The head flight attendant, Emily Parker, looked up after finishing her final checks. She meant to greet them but stopped when she saw Ryan Mitchell walking in behind them with a worried expression. Rachel stepped forward, lowering her voice. "What's going on?" she asked. Ryan Mitchell leaned in. "David Thompson and the ground crew just escorted them through. Clara has refused to let them board the plane. A call has been made." His voice dropped lower, as if from someone high up, really high up. Rachel's eyes widened. She looked toward the family, who were now buckled in, silent and calm. They didn't seem angry. They didn't even appear concerned. But there was still something there. It seemed they were waiting for the next part of an undisclosed plan. Back at the gate, Clara remained still. She stood near the corner of the counter, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. Her heart raced, but her pride wouldn't let her show it. Lewis returned to the desk holding a tablet and said firmly, Please sit near the crew area. Mr. Walker will speak with you after the flight. Luis says firmly, please take a seat near the crew area. Mr. Walker will talk to you after the flight. Clara raises an eyebrow. I'm still working this flight. No, Clara, you're not, Luis replies. You're suspended until further notice. What for what? Just for one mistake. Luis doesn't answer. He just nods to the on-duty flight attendant stepping forward ready to replace Clara. Clara's mouth opens to protest, but she notices passengers watching discreetly, pointing their phones, whispers spreading like wind through the rows. Her face burns. She says nothing more. She wanted to argue, but saw passengers watching phones, subtly raised whispers, flowing through the seats like a breeze. Her face flushed. She said no more. Instead, she steps away from the desk and plops down in a crew seat near the far end of the boarding gate. Inside the plane, Rachel approaches the Moore family. This time, she slightly lowers her head. If there's anything I can do to make your flight more comfortable, she says softly. To the Moore family. This time, she slightly bows her head. If there's anything I can do to make your flight more comfortable, she gently says. Stephen smiles politely at her. Thank you, you've already done more than enough. Rachel nods once, then leaves. She doesn't push or ask further questions, but now she feels something unspoken has shifted in the air. No further questions, but now she senses an unspoken change in the atmosphere. Boarding continues, but the mood has shifted. Passengers are more cautious, realizing something strange just happened at the gate. Some glance awkwardly at the front rows, then quickly look away when they catch Stephen's gaze. Then as the door begins to close and the cabin settles, a gentle message appears on Rachel's tablet screen. A direct message from corporate operations. 5 simple words awaiting contact from operations office. She looks up sharply. Something is coming. And it's not small. The airplane door slams shut with a loud click, followed by a soft chime, signaling the final cabin check. As the engines start and the crew begins, the safety demonstrations, Rachel keeps an eye on her tablet. She's worked dozens of flights, seen plenty of incidents in the air, and last-minute changes. But she's never gotten a message like this. No explanation, no context, just those 5 words from the highest airline command. She glances over at the Moore family. Stephen sits quietly, one leg crossed over the other, fingers intertwined on his knee, watching the crew calmly and steady. Teresa gently strokes Alana's hair as the girl leans on her shoulder. Daniel pulled out a book but didn't turn a single page. He was listening and watching just like his father. The family wasn't tense. They weren't sad. They were waiting. Rachel walked to the front galley, pressed the intercom button, and asked to speak to the captain. A few minutes later, Captain James Carter stepped out tall and seasoned, the kind of person whose presence could bring a natural silence to any room. Rachel handed him the tablet. He read the message with narrowed eyes. Operations office, he said quietly. She nodded. It made sense. It was related to what had happened during boarding. The family from seats 1A to 1D had been denied boarding by the gate staff. Someone had made a call. From there, everything changed. Captain James Carter glanced at the family, then at the plaque. He stayed silent for a long moment. I'll contact the coordination department, he said. After speaking, he returned to the cockpit. Back in the jump seat, Clara sat stiffly, arms crossed. Every few minutes, she caught glances from other passengers or overheard quiet laughter from people talking about her. Other passengers or overheard quiet laughter from people talking about her. A man even walked past her, muttering loud enough, "She still wears the badge." She ignored them and just stared straight ahead. Her chest burned with shame, but her mind was spinning. Why had the flight stopped because of them? Who had that kind of influence? One call shouldn't stop an entire plane unless it came from her boss. Sure, she'd made assumptions, but she had done this hundreds of times before. No one had ever challenged her like this. Passengers usually got angry, maybe filed complaints, but this wasn't a complaint. This was something else. In the cockpit, the captain's call was answered almost immediately. On the other end wasn't the coordinator, not even a direct supervisor. A calm, steady voice spoke up. This was Robert Klein, Director of Aviation Strategy. We understand there are 4 passengers, seated from 1A to 1D. Please confirm. The captain replied clearly and confidently. Confirmed. 4 family members, all seated and settled. The incident was reported during boarding. Martin's voice didn't rise. No need for that. Maintain the current flight plan. Upon landing, keep the entire crew on board. Don't release them until instructed. The ground response team will be waiting. Yes, Captain. Keep your lead flight attendant alert. The caller was no one else. He's our major shareholder, the one who signed off on our final merger deal. His name is Michael Harris. The line went silent. The captain slowly sat down, eyes wide. He looked out the cockpit window at the man sitting in seat 1A, calm, composed, unreadable, and then it hit him. This flight had changed before it even left the ground. The plane rose smoothly and steadily. Passengers were settled chatter, mixing with the gentle hum of the engines. But in first class, no one spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was measured and controlled. Stephen leaned back in his seat, eyes closed but not sleeping. Teresa gently covered Alana with a blanket as she started to drift off. Daniel sat quietly, staring out the window, expression unreadable. Rachel walked the cabin, handing out water, but her hands were shaky. As usual, she kept glancing at that family. Each time she passed by, she felt a pressure in her chest, like she wasn't just serving drinks anymore, but living through something far more important than she understood. She was part of something much bigger than she realized. Sitting in the back, Clara's legs shook with anxiety. She tried to keep a blank expression, but the whispers never stopped. Even the crew's behavior began to change. No one dared look her in the eye. No one asked for her opinion. She had become invisible except for the constant heat of judging eyes weighing down on her from all sides. Finally, she thought quietly. Finally, she stood up and walked toward Rachel, who was standing near the galley. "I need to speak with the captain," she whispered, trying to stay calm. Rachel didn't even blink. "You're not allowed in the cockpit. This is serious," Clara hissed. "I have to explain what happened before things blow up." "It's already been blown out of proportion," Rachel said softly, cutting her off. Clara stood frozen like a statue. Rachel lowered her voice even more. "Do you know who that man is?" Clara didn't answer. "He's not just flying for fun. He's the reason we all get paid next month. His signature's on every extended flight, and you just stopped him and his family from boarding their own plane." Clara opened her mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. She felt empty. Her own plane. Clara opened her mouth to respond but couldn't say a word. She had nothing. Rachel turned away, leaving Clara standing alone near. The issue wasn't about a seat. This wasn't about policy. This was about judgment, and her career was over. Back in the cockpit, Captain James Carter sat silently, eyes on the horizon, but mind replaying every word from the executive's call. He had never been instructed mid-flight to keep the crew on board after landing. That only happened if there was a legal violation or a high-level internal incident, and this wasn't going to be covered up. A legal violation or a high-level internal incident, and this wouldn't be hidden. He glanced down at his screen. Another message popped up. "Prepare an incident report. The Internal Affairs Department will interview you when you arrive. All communications must be recorded." That was the moment he realized. The real chaos hadn't even started yet. The hours passed painfully slow. The plane flew through calm skies, but the atmosphere inside grew heavier with every mile. First class. He had never received instructions in the air to hold the crew after landing. That only happened in cases of a criminal activity or high-level internal matters. And this wouldn't be covered up. Criminal activity or high-level internal matters, and this wouldn't be covered up. He glanced down at his screen. Another message came in. "Prepare an incident report. The Internal Affairs Department will conduct interviews when you arrive. All communications must be documented." That was the moment he realized. The real chaos hadn't even begun. The minutes dragged on slowly. The plane flew through the quiet sky, but the atmosphere inside grew heavier with every mile. The first class cabin remained unusually quiet. Even passengers who typically ordered drinks or asked for extra pillows seemed cautious, unsure how to behave. Everyone had witnessed what happened at the gate, and everyone felt the shift as the Moore family boarded. When they realized this was not an ordinary family, Stephen hadn't moved much since takeoff. He sat upright, eyes straight ahead, silent, not cold, not arrogant, just still like a man who knew exactly how everything would unfold. Teresa rested her head against the window, watching the clouds drift by her hand, gently resting on Alana's shoulder. Finally, Daniel opened his book, but it seemed he had only been reading the same page for the past 20 minutes. Rachel, holding a warm towel, quietly walked around them, hesitating. She stopped, leaned slightly toward Stephen. "If you or your family need anything, please don't hesitate." Stephen turned to look at her for the first time and meeting her gaze. With a calm yet heavy expression, "You're very kind," he simply said. "That's enough." Rachel nodded slightly and continued walking down the aisle, her heart pounding. That man didn't speak. He didn't need to. She had served executives before, some loud, some difficult, but none like him. Michael Harris had a presence that demanded respect without asking for it. It made people self-reflect. Back in the crew area, Clara could no longer sit still. She stood near the galley, arms crossed tightly, every part of her body tense with fear. She had replayed her actions over and over in her mind, the way she looked at that family, the way she assumed they were wrong, the way she hadn't even checked all 4 tickets before deciding they didn't belong to them. Her pride still tried to twist the story. It was just a misunderstanding. It was procedure. Anyone could have made the same decision. But something deeper inside her knew that wasn't right. She hadn't questioned the policy. She had questioned her assumptions. And now she was sitting at the back of the plane. She had once been in charge. The seat that used to be hers was now filled by a young flight attendant she had trained just months ago. The curtain separating first class from the rest of the cabin had never felt so symbolic. She wasn't just physically removed. She had been pulled out of the world she believed she belonged to. The chatter among the remaining crew members felt different too. Usually they would joke around during the flight share snacks, gossip about passengers, but today they hardly said anything. And when they did, it wasn't to her. She overheard bits of conversation as they passed by. "He didn't even bother to speak. HR will handle this right away. She really has ruined her entire career." She clenched her fists under the galley counter. The silence from the leadership was worse than being yelled at. The call she had been waiting for from the supervisor never came. No support, no backup, just silence telling her that damage had been done. Clara's gaze turned toward the cabin. She couldn't see through the curtain, but she could feel them. Steve and Teresa, the kids calm, unaffected, rising above the noise above her judgment. And in that moment, for the first time in many years of flying, Clara Coleman realized a brutal truth. The people she had once looked down on were now the ones quietly watching her fall. And they didn't need to say a word to make it real. The roar of the engines filled the cabin like a soundtrack. But to Clara, it was louder than ever before. Each minute dragged on like an hour. Every glance from her crew was heavy. She tried to hold her head high, tried to act like this was just a small mistake that could be overlooked, but nothing happened. The silence around her grew thicker, and no one looked at her anymore. Not even the flight attendant she had once scolded for folding a napkin the wrong way. In the cockpit, Captain James Carter was reviewing the latest directive. His jaw clenched. A new message appeared on the screen from Operations Control. Passenger Moore was considered a top priority by management. Ensure a full incident report is submitted within 1 hour of landing. Legal and HR teams will meet the crew at the gate. Mitchell rubbed his temples. He had flown many senators, athletes, and celebrities, but this time was different. Michael Harris wasn't a celebrity. He didn't want attention, but the moment he walked in, he owned the room. Mitchell could feel it deep in his bones. This man didn't want revenge. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to argue. He was ready for everything. And no one on this flight could stop them. Back in first class, Daniel finally spoke up. He leaned toward his father and asked, "Do you think she understands what she did?" Stephen didn't answer right away. He stared straight ahead, his eyes unfocused on anything in particular. Then he turned gently to his son. "Understanding isn't something you hear in words," he said softly. "You see it in silence." Daniel nodded once and looked out the window. Rachel, passing by the second row, had heard. She didn't want to listen, but those words stuck in her chest. Stephen's voice carried no bitterness, no anger, just a gentle truth that made everything around seem smaller. She kept walking down the aisle and stopped by the galley where Tyler Evans, a young flight attendant in his second month, was rearranging cups. "Is that true?" he whispered. "That's Michael Harris, the shareholder." Tyler Evans was rearranging cups. "Is that true?" he whispered again. "That's Michael Harris, the shareholder." Rachel gave a slight nod. "Yeah," he said without another word. The system confirmed it. Operations had called the airport directly. Tyler Evans' eyes widened. "Oh, I heard she blocked them without scanning all the tickets." "She did," Rachel confirmed. Tyler glanced behind him. "She's done right." Rachel didn't answer right away. She didn't want to feel happy over someone else's downfall. But the truth was she had seen Clara make life miserable for the staff below her for years, belittling them, correcting them in front of passengers, and mocking those who didn't fit her idea of deserved first-class treatment. Clara wasn't going to leave this plane the way she boarded it. Finally, Rachel said, "That's for sure." Meanwhile, Clara sat alone in her seat trying to make time pass faster. Her hands gripped the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had tried texting her union rep earlier, but there was no signal. Her heart pounded harder with every update from the cockpit, every subtle change in the crew's tone. Then Rachel appeared beside her, standing stiff and unreadable. Clara looked up, startled. "They want you up front," Rachel said. Clara blinked. Rachel nodded. The captain said, "Someone from the company was trying to connect. They want to speak with you directly." Clara slowly stood, brushing off her uniform as if it still mattered. Her legs felt heavy. Her mouth was dry. She followed Rachel toward the front. Each step down the narrow aisle felt like walking into a courtroom. When they reached the cockpit door, Captain James Carter stepped out holding a wired headset. "They're waiting," he said, not unkind, but not gentle either. Clara put on the headset. The line was silent for a second. Then a deep, calm, clear voice spoke, confident and steady. "Ms. Tyler Evston, this is Thomas Grant from Corporate Ethics." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "I assume you're aware of the current situation," Clara swallowed. "I don't mean to assume," the voice continued evenly. "Not yet. Just listen." And Clara did. She stood there, headset on, while the man on the other end, whom she had never spoken to before, spoke clearly. "Before this flight lands," he said, "you need to understand one thing. This is not a small matter. This is not a routine report. You've made a decision that puts the company at risk publicly, legally, and reputationally." Clara felt suffocated. "You haven't just disrespected a passenger," the voice went on. "You disrespected the owner." And right then the last shred of control she clung to shattered. Clara stood frozen at the cockpit door, headset still on. Her back stiff, throat, dry hands slightly trembling, but she didn't dare let go. She listened as Thomas Grant from Corporate Ethics spoke with a cold calmness sharper than any yell could be. "This isn't just about a delay," he said. "It's about the message your actions send. And unfortunately, this isn't your first red flag. There are prior records, multiple crew complaints, 3 previous passenger reports, and at least 1 ignored warning from internal compliance." Clara opened her mouth to speak, but Thomas didn't stop. "You made a decision without verifying facts. You did not check all 4 boarding passes. You didn't get supervisor approval. You didn't follow procedure." He paused. "But more than that, you judged them." The headphones felt heavier on her ears with every word. Clara wanted to argue back, to insist that things weren't like that, to say she was just trying to follow procedure. But every excuse disappeared before it could even form. "You're staying on this flight," Thomas continued. "When we land, you'll be escorted to the administrative office at the terminal. You're not to speak with the media, your colleagues, or any passengers. Security will be present." "Do you understand?" Clara closed her eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the wave of nausea rising in her chest. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, what?" "Yes, I understand." The line went dead without a goodbye. Slowly, she took off the headphones, her hands now soaked with sweat. Captain James Carter said nothing. He just nodded toward the co-pilot's seat. She moved up front near the cockpit and closed the door behind her. Clara sat down as if she were sitting on glass, her thoughts swirling chaotically around everything. And it was too late. Back in first class, the Moore family remained calm. Alana had fallen asleep, her head resting on her mother's lap, still clutching the gold gift bag handle loosely in her hand. Teresa adjusted her daughter's coat and softly whispered things only a mother could say. Stephen stared out the window, unreadable. His fingers rested near the armrest. Finally, Daniel set his book aside and leaned toward his mother. "Is she going to lose her job?" he asked quietly. Teresa didn't answer right away. She looked at her son, then at her husband. Stephen spoke without turning around. "She lost it the moment she thought she was worth more than us." Daniel nodded, though the weight of those words slowly began to settle. A few rows behind other first-class passengers whispered among themselves and raised their hands. One man, clearly uncomfortable, said they didn't even bother to speak up. Just one call and everything changed. His companion replied, "That's what happens when someone with power is treated like they don't belong here." The first man muttered, "That's what happens when someone with power is treated like they don't belong here." Or more like don't say much at all. Orders were carried out quickly, but no one lingered. The energy had shifted. There was a new awareness in the cabin. The energy had changed. There was a new understanding in the cabin. An invisible pressure surrounded the crew. Everyone could feel it. In the back galley, junior flight attendant Tyler Evans whispered to Rachel, "Is it true she's going to be pulled off as soon as we land?" Rachel nodded. "The manager wants her escorted before the report. She won't be coming back after this, right?" Rachel's voice dropped. "No one comes back after offending the man who owns the airline. The manager wants her escorted before the report. She won't be coming back after this, will she?" Rachel's voice dropped. "No one can come back after disrespecting the man who owns her airline." Clara sat forward slightly hunched, trying not to draw attention. She used to confidently walk through the cabin adjusting uniforms, scolding staff about meal prep, talking to passengers she deemed unfit. But now she felt invisible in the worst way possible. No one looked at her with respect, only pity, satisfaction, or quiet judgment understanding. She tried to breathe, but the air felt like it no longer belonged to her. Maybe if she apologized publicly, maybe if she made a written statement, maybe if she pleaded with HR, but something inside her already knew. None of that mattered. It didn't matter to them. It didn't matter to the passengers. And it certainly didn't matter to Michael Harris. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cause a scene. But with just one calm private phone call, he changed her entire future. It wasn't revenge, it was consequence. And only now did Clara realize this was far more lasting. The flight was nearing its destination, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have begun our descent. Please fasten your seat belts and make sure all tray tables are in their upright positions." The flight attendants prepared the cabin for landing. For most passengers, this was just a routine announcement. But for a few on this flight, it meant something completely different. For Clara, it was the beginning of the end. For Stephen, it was a quiet countdown to closure. And for the crew, it was the moment they had all been silently preparing for, since the gate announcement shook up the day. Clara stared at the illuminated seatbelt sign above her, as if it suddenly carried a new meaning. The seat beneath her felt too hard, her uniform too tight. The seat beneath her felt too hard, her uniform too tight. The tension in her shoulders was nearly unbearable. Shame mixed with fear and guilt was wrapped inside her pride. She had never doubted her place in this company, never feared being fired, let alone pushed out. But now she couldn't stop trembling, not on the outside, but inside where it mattered most. She replayed every moment at the gate in her mind. The tone she used, the assumptions she made, how she dismissed the family's explanation without a second thought. She hadn't even scanned the little girl's or the boys' tickets. She just assumed because they didn't seem to fit, because in her mind first class had a certain image, and they didn't fit that image. And now she couldn't even sit properly in the jump seat. Rachel slowly and quietly approached her holding a sealed envelope. "This sentence was passed on by the captain," she said dryly. "They're waiting for you when we land. Instructions inside." Clara held the envelope with trembling fingers. Rachel added gently, "You know there was a time when you were one of the best in this crew?" Clara looked up surprised. Rachel didn't smile. "You understood the rules better than anyone, but somewhere along the way, you forgot something." "What's that?" Clara's voice cracked. "The rules are meant to protect people, not judge them." She walked away before Clara could respond. Up front in the plane, the Moore family remained calm. Stephen looked out the window, watching the city skyline gradually appear below. Teresa gently wiped Alana's cheek with a napkin. The little girl had slept through most of the flight, unaware she had slept through a storm. Daniel pulled out a notebook and was writing something. Maybe thoughts, maybe nothing at all, but his expression was focused. Teresa leaned towards Stephen and whispered, "Do you think she understands now?" Stephen answered without taking his eyes off the window. "It's not about what she understands, but what others see, what they remember." Teresa nodded softly. "Then maybe this matters more than we thought." Stephen turned to her, his eyes tired but determined. "It matters because it's not just about us. It's about people like us, those pushed aside, doubted, ignored. Today, someone saw what is usually hidden. Back in the galley, Tyler Evans watched the runway start to appear in the distance, through the small window near the service door. He glanced toward him. Clara, who was staring at the closed curtain of first class. "Do you think he planned this?" she asked Rachel. That he knew how far this would go. Rachel folded a tray tablecloth. She didn't answer right away. "No, I think he hoped it wouldn't go that far. I think he gave her a chance to make it right." Tyler Evans nodded slowly. "She didn't take it." "No," Rachel said. She doubled down. The plane descended lower, the wheels locked into place with a mechanical grind. The cabin shook gently. Passengers sat up straight, buckled their seatbelts, and put their belongings back in their bags. The usual final moves before landing, but the mood was anything but usual. Stephen reached into the seat pocket and pulled out his phone. A single message lit up the lock screen. The legal team and press conference had been scheduled. The statement was approved for release. He didn't reply. He locked his phone and set it aside. His part was done. And now the rest of the world would decide what to do with what they saw. As the plane neared the runway, Clara gripped the envelope tightly. Her heart pounded. Her mouth was dry. Her future was gone. She knew it now. But what scared her most wasn't just losing her job. It was that every passenger on this plane had just witnessed her last flight, and none of them would ever forget. The wheels touched down with a soft sound, but to Clara it felt like the plane had crashed into concrete. The usual polite applause echoed through the cabin, routine hollow and brief. Passengers began to stir, reaching for their bags, stretching stiff limbs, chatting quietly. But there was no more normal in Clara's world. For her, this landing was not the end of a journey. It was the start of reckoning. She sat still, clutching the envelope on her lap, her breath shallow and uneven. Her name tag felt heavier than ever, and she painfully realized the crew members were avoiding her eyes. Even Tyler Evans, the youngest, and usually the most excited person, she kept her eyes glued to the kitchen cabinet, pretending to rearrange some unnecessary cups. From the front, Captain James Carter made the final announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, the local time is 3:42 p.m. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened until the seatbelt sign is turned off. On behalf of the entire crew, we thank you for flying with us today." The seatbelt sign went off, completely triggering a new wave of activity, but none of it involved Clara. She stayed frozen in place, her eyes blank, each second feeling longer than the last. Just over a second before, at the front of the plane, Rachel pulled the curtain close, separating first class from the rest of the cabin. Stephen and his family sat quietly. Alana had just woken up a few minutes earlier, rubbing her eyes. Teresa whispered something softly to her, gently brushing her daughter's hair back with a tender motherly touch. Daniel closed his notebook and neatly packed it into his backpack. Stephen remained calm, his body relaxed but his mind clearly focused. Rachel stepped closer to them. "The ground team has arrived," she said quietly. "They're waiting just outside the jet bridge." Stephen nodded. "Thank you." Rachel hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "There's also media outside. Just wanted to let you know." Teresa looked at her husband. "Have you told them yet?" He shook his head. "You don't have to say anything. They've been following everything already." Passengers began standing, gathering their belongings and lining up for the aisle. But no one was in a rush. No pushing or shoving. Instead, they turned around, some slowly, some less discreetly, to face forward toward the Moore family and Clara. In first class, a man in a jacket leaned toward Stephen. "I saw everything back at the gate," he said softly. "What you did was powerful." Stephen looked at him and answered calmly, "I didn't do anything. I just didn't let it go." Clara noticed them now, her face still forward, but her head turning back as whispers spread. She knew the scene was being watched from every angle. A woman sitting a few rows away even held her phone at chest level, the camera just angled enough to record. She wasn't trying to hide it. She didn't need to. Then the jet bridge door opened. They were there. Two security guards in black uniforms with silver trim stood on either side of a woman in a sleek gray business suit. Her name tag read, Karen Walsh, Corporate Relations. Her face was unreadable, but her presence signaled the end. Rachel stepped aside as Nora entered the plane. Her heels clicked softly on the floor. She made eye contact with Rachel for a brief moment. Then she looked at Captain James Carter, who had just come out of the cockpit. "Ms. Tyler Evston." Nora's tone was neutral and polite. Clara slowly stood up, her hands trembling. Then she looked at Captain James Carter, who had just stepped out of the cockpit. Miss Tyler Evston. Nora's voice was neutral and polite. Clara stood slowly, her hands trembling. She clutched the envelope like a lifeline. Please gather your personal belongings and follow us. You will be escorted directly to the administrative office. Clara looked around one last time at the passengers, the crew, and the space she once owned. Rachel handed her a bag with her things neatly packed taken from the overhead bin. Clara took it without a word. Then she walked down the aisle. She used to strut with confidence. The passengers she had once scolded ignored, now smiled at her with feigned grace. The faces now looked at her as if she were a lesson. Some looked on with pity, some felt satisfied, many judged. When she reached first class, her eyes briefly met Michael Harris's. He didn't smirk. He didn't glare. He didn't need to. He looked at her like someone looking at an old uniform. Worn out, discarded, no longer useful. And before she turned away, Teresa was still sitting there, gently speaking. No mockery, no cruelty, just calm. I hope this teaches you more than just a costly lesson. Clara's throat tightened. She nodded without answering, her face burning. Then she walked through the open airplane door, off the plane, out of her role, and out of the world she had built around her identity. The hallway on the other side was filled with silent people in dark suits with cold eyes. This time, no applause, just silence, and the soft fading sound of her footsteps behind her. The jet bridge door slammed shut behind Clara with a loud noise. The sound echoed more in her mind than in the hallway. The moment her feet touched the carpeted floor of the terminal, she no longer felt like she was at an airport. It felt like a stage, a quiet, sterile hallway where every step was watched, recorded, and remembered. Two security officers didn't touch her, but they stood close enough to make their intentions clear. Nora walked ahead, her heels clicking rhythmically, leading with the precision of someone used to cleaning up disasters. Clara followed like a shadow, shoulders, hunched, eyes down, hoping no one would recognize her. But of course they did recognize her. Even in the short distance between the gate and the elevator, all eyes were on her. Two gate agents near the terminal counter whispered to each other, one of them whom Clara had publicly corrected for misusing a phrase over the internal comms system now looked straight at her. No malice, just silent, stunned. The elevator doors opened and Nora stepped inside. Clara followed silently. As the doors closed, the silence grew even heavier. Clara glanced at Nora, who was standing there holding a tablet in one hand, not looking up. "Can I talk to someone in HR before this goes any further?" she asked. Nora didn't look at her. "You'll talk to them in about 10 minutes. "I mean informally," Clara added firmly. Nora replied calmly, "Nothing unusual happened. You'll be handled according to company procedure. Legal and compliance matters have been reviewed. Your file has been pulled. Your access has been revoked." Clara felt her insides twist. "You don't understand. I didn't do this out of hatred. I made a decision." Nora slightly turned her head, eyes calm. "And that judgment cost you everything?" The elevator chimed. The doors opened to a quiet hallway. The hall had frosted glass walls, soft carpet, and gentle ceiling lights. Clara had been in this part of the terminal before, but only during training many years ago. Back then, she thought this place was clean and impressive. Now it felt cold and bleak. They passed a receptionist who nodded to Nora. No words were exchanged. Clara followed. She stepped through a side door into a small windowless meeting room. Inside sat a man in a navy suit speaking. Nathan Brooks, a young HR supervisor, polite and extremely efficient. A sealed file sat on the table before him, full of papers. "Ms. Tyler Evston," Ethan said in an unfriendly tone. "Please have a seat." Clara sat down across from him. Nora stood silently by the door. Ethan opened the file. Ethan's tone was unfriendly. "Please have a seat." Clara sat down across from him. Nora stood silently by the door. Ethan opened the file and pulled out a stack of forms. "You're officially being terminated, effective immediately. This document outlines your dismissal based on violations including failure to follow procedure, mistreatment of passengers, and damaging the airline's reputation." Clara's mouth dropped open. "But I wasn't warned beforehand. I didn't even know who he was." Ethan's tone didn't change. "The issue isn't who he was. The issue is what you did. The passenger's condition only increased the severity of your response but it's your actions, assumptions, words, and refusal to verify that are the violations. Clara stared at the paper, the bold heading at the top, termination of employment, final notice. She tried to steady her breath, slow her thoughts to form a sentence that could save her. You've had several flags notes on behavior, passenger concerns, but nothing serious enough to fire me until now. Clara shook her head, gripping the edge of the table. You've had several flags notes on behavior, passenger concerns, but nothing serious enough to fire you until now. Clara shook her head, gripping the edge of the table. You're firing me over one mistake. Ethan looked into her eyes for the first time. We're not firing you over one mistake. We're firing you because this mistake revealed something we can no longer ignore. The room fell silent. Clara couldn't think. Her hands went numb. She wanted to speak, but every word felt too small now. Please sign here, Ethan said, sliding the form toward her. Her fingers trembled as she took the pen. She paused at the signature line, a last flicker of hope shining in her eyes. Is there anything I can do? Ethan didn't flinch. You can sign, she signed. He slid another paper across the table. You'll also have to return your badge access card and uniform. You'll be escorted to the staff center to collect your belongings. You're not allowed to contact current employees without permission. Clara nodded slowly. What happens after that? Ethan closed the folder. Do you leave and go back to your family? She asked softly. What happens to them? Ethan didn't answer right away. He took look at Nora, the last one to speak up. They don't press charges. They don't file a lawsuit. They don't need to. What they do is much longer. Clara blinked. What do you mean? Nora leaned forward slightly, her voice now lower. They held back. They didn't yell. They didn't threaten. They made one phone call, and that call showed everyone from top to bottom how powerful quiet dignity really is. Clara slid back in her chair, the silence painful and slow, tearing at her heart. And in that silence, she finally understood what Stephen had taught everyone on the plane. Noise doesn't equal power. Status doesn't equal influence. And silence, when kept with truth, can change everything. Clara walked out of the meeting room with her badge removed, her access card deactivated, and the last copy of her contract termination letter folded neatly under her arm like a death notice. Her hands trembled as she gripped her travel bag, her knuckles pale under the fluorescent lights. Now it was all real, no warnings, no suspensions, no temporary mistakes. She had been cut loose not just from the flight, but from the very industry she had built her identity in. Nora quietly stepped forward, leading her down another hallway toward the crew center. 2 security guards were still nearby, still silent, still polite, still present. Clara didn't resist. There was nothing left to fight against. Every hallway they passed felt more humiliating than the last. The terminal buzzed just beyond the glass walls. Passengers laughed, pulled their suitcases, hurried onto planes, and boarding announcements echoed through the space. Just another ordinary day at the airport. But for Clara, it was the longest walk of her life. They entered the crew center through a back door, a door she had used hundreds of times before arriving early to brief junior flight attendants or do last-minute uniform checks. She used to feel like that place was her space. Now it felt like foreign territory. Inside, a young man from operations handed her a plastic bin labeled with her name. Inside were spare uniforms, badge holders, a half-used notebook scrawled with reminders, and a coffee mug that read, "Lead Flight Attendant." Just looking at it made her chest ache. Nora stood to the side, reviewing something on her tablet, giving Clara space but not too much. Clara turned to her. Is anyone going to talk to me about what happens next? Severance pay, HR follow-up, Nora said without looking up. You'll receive a package by mail. Your employee record has been flagged. By policy, you're not allowed. Hundreds of times before, when she had come in early to guide junior crew members or do last-minute uniform checks, she had once felt like that space was hers. Now she felt like she was in a foreign land. Inside, a young man from operations handed her a plastic bin labeled with her name. Inside were spare uniforms, badge holders, a half-used notebook filled with scrawled reminders, and a coffee mug that read, "Head Flight Attendant." Just looking at it made her chest ache. Nora stood to the side, checking something on her tablet, giving Clara space but not too much. Clara turned to her. Is anyone going to talk to me about the next steps? Severance pay, HR follow-up. Nora didn't look up. You'll receive a package in the mail. Your employee file has been flagged. Per policy, you are not allowed to work for any airline affiliated with our company network. Clara held her breath. Flagged. At this point, Nora looked directly into her eyes. Red flag. That means you are not eligible for rehire in this industry. This incident, along with your behavior history, has led to a permanent classification. Clara felt blood drain from her face, but that was for employees no longer trusted to represent the company's values. Nora had done her job protecting passengers from repeat offenses. Clara plopped down on a bench in the corner of the room. She didn't say anything for a long while, just stared at, protecting passengers from repeated misconduct. Clara slumped down on the bench in the corner of the room. She said nothing for a long time, just staring at the things in the box as if they belonged to someone else. 12 years of flying thousands of hours in the air, all condensed into a finished plastic box. Her mind searched for anything, any excuse, any justification, or any detail she could hold on to. She was proud of her work. She had trained new hires. She had memorized every policy. She was sharp, quick, strict, but never kind. She had judged people by how they dressed, how they spoke, and how they moved. She had corrected passengers when it wasn't necessary. She had assumed, and this time her assumption hit wrong about a family. Not just because of who they were, but because of what they couldn't do. They didn't yell, they didn't threaten, they didn't even ask for an apology. They made a call and Clara's world changed forever. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. For a moment, her heart raced. Maybe someone from management, maybe someone ready to say this had gone too far. But when she pulled it out, the screen showed only one name, Jessica Hayes, a former colleague she hadn't spoken to in over a year. Clara answered quickly, craving a familiar voice. Hello. There was a pause, then a hesitant voice. I saw it. I watched the footage. Clara swallowed. The truth isn't what you think. I mean, it's not like they say. Another pause. Jessica's voice dropped to a whisper. Clara, they didn't say anything. That's the problem. You caused all the damage before anyone even spoke. Clara opened her mouth to reply, but the line cut off. She stared at the phone still pressed to her ear. For the first time in a long while, there were no excuses left, no policies to quote, no tone to correct, no crew to command. She was alone. Nora looked over. Ready, Clara nodded, stood up and picked up the trash bin. They walked out through a side hallway leading straight to the employee parking lot. Security personnel followed silently until they reached the emergency exit. Nora turned to Clara one last time. You're not banned from flying as a passenger, but don't wear the uniform anymore and don't expect silence from the media. Clara stepped out into the harsh daylight. The air hit her hard as if the sky itself had changed. She walked toward the parking lot, unsure where to go, unsure what to do next, only certain of one painful truth. The Moore family hadn't just boarded the plane that day. They had stepped into her life and showed her what true strength looks like when it doesn't speak up. And now, with nothing left to hide behind, Sarah Coleman would have to face what she had always believed she excelled at: accountability. Clara sat in her car for what felt like hours, engine off, keys clenched in her hand. The sun began to cast long shadows across the windshield, but she didn't move. She couldn't. Her bag sat beside her, the box of belongings on the back seat, a silent last reminder of the job she no longer had in a world that had discarded her. She used to believe this place was hers, with the uniform, the seniority, and the reputation. She confidently entered the terminal. She spoke to passengers with authority and enforced policies with pride. She believed she deserved it all, that she belonged. At the top, that first class was the space she had the right to protect. But the truth had slowly revealed itself over the past few hours, like water finding its way through cracks. What she had been protecting wasn't the airline. It wasn't safety. It wasn't professionalism. It was her ego. It was the quiet voice inside her head. That voice telling her she could decide who belonged here. And when that voice was challenged, she didn't hesitate. She fought hard. And now she sat in a car that felt like a box, unable to drive, unable to think, completely alone. She opened her phone, scrolling through contacts, people she'd led on flights, colleagues she'd trained, supervisors she'd worked with. Some had reached out earlier with vague messages. I'm sorry. Are you okay? It's been a tough day. But as the story spread, the silence grew louder. She tapped a name, Mark Sullivan, a longtime coworker who had shared dozens of long-haul flights with her. The phone rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. She tried another, Amy Larson, whom she had mentored. Voicemail again. One more, Chris Bennett, a flight attendant she had defended during an incident years ago. Sorry, number unreachable. This industry is small. News travels faster than truth. Clara slowly set the phone down, tears welling up. Not from injustice, not from anger, but from the terrifying realization that this wasn't just a firing. It was an erasure. She tried to open her email, hoping to find some message. Any info from HR, any official word. Instead, a stream of alerts lit up her screen. News articles, social media posts, a blurry photo of her standing at the gate, another of her walking off the plane with head bowed, surrounded by security. Flight attendant fired after refusing family first-class boarding. A quiet power move by the CEO that left crew members just a termination. It was a eraser. She tried to open her email, hoping to see some message. Any information from HR, any official communication, but instead a series of alerts popped up on her screen. News articles, mentions on social media, a blurry photo of her standing at the gate, another photo capturing her walking off. The plane with her head down, surrounded by security. Flight attendant fired after denying a family entry to first class. The CEO's silent power move left crew members feeling they made a call. That viral moment sparked a discussion across the industry about bias. She scrolled down further, reading comments from people she didn't know. Strangers. She got what she deserved. The calmness of that man was incredible. Imagine having power until the actual owner speaks up. She looked so confident until the truth wasn't. Each comment felt like a cut. Another truth she had tried to ignore. She opened the article and saw it. Quoting Edgar, passenger who witnessed everything. He didn't yell. He didn't cause a scene. He just said, "I will call." And then everything stopped. She closed her eyes. That was the moment everything changed. But all he did was pick up the phone. No threats, no lawsuits, nothing. Social media criticism, just one phone call, one sentence, a man choosing dignity over drama. She remembered how he looked at her, not with anger, not even with contempt, but with calm disappointment deeper than any rage. That's how her father used to look at her when she did. Something selfish, like a teacher's expression when you betray their trust. The way people look at you when you lose something you can never get back. Clara felt the pressure building, breath quickening, until finally the weight of it all settled. She hadn't just lost her job. She had lost her place in a world she thought she understood. She could still hear Teresa's voice, gentle and steady. "I hope this teaches you more than just a costly lesson." At the time, she didn't fully understand. She was too angry and too ashamed. But now, alone in the silence, she finally realized the problem wasn't just her mistake. The problem was what it revealed. And for the first time in her life, Sarah Coleman no longer saw herself as the calm, powerful flight attendant she'd always imagined, but as someone given power and used it recklessly. The ones who really paid the price were the people who didn't even speak up. Clara parked there, probably her car, long after most passengers had left, and the sun had slipped below the horizon. Darkness covered the sky. The airport's headlights cast long shadows over the nearly empty lot. She hadn't even turned the key yet. She hadn't even reached for it. The heaviness in her chest hadn't eased. It wasn't just guilt anymore, but something worse, deeper. It was the realization that she had become everything she once despised in others. The kind of employee who makes snap judgments, acts arrogantly, and dismisses others' appearances. She'd always been proud of keeping things professional and upholding standards. But those words now echoed hollow in her mind. What she called professionalism had become a habit. What she called standards had become a wall she built to keep others out. And that day, she didn't see a family. She saw a disruption, a threat to her control, and she acted immediately. The wall she built to keep others away. And that day, she didn't see any families at all. She saw disruption, a threat to her control, and she acted quickly. Her phone lit up again with many new messages. An article now included a brief statement from the airline. She slowly opened it, reading each word as if it were a sentence being conveyed. "We do not tolerate actions that violate our values of inclusion and respect." This incident is under comprehensive review and immediate steps have been taken to address the issue according to company policy. We deeply apologize to the Moore family. They didn't name her. They didn't need to. Everyone already knew. She scrolled down further. One of the passengers had posted a video, a shaky, unclear recording captured during the confrontation at the gate. The audio was clear. It captured her voice, sharp and dismissive, telling the family to step aside and wait to rebook their tickets. The children's faces were visible discomfort, confusion, and the calm of the father as he quietly said, "If you're sure about this, I'll make the call." Those comments were harsh, but not without reason. She closed the app and stared straight ahead. For years, Clara believed her experience gave her the right to assert control. That seniority brought certainty, but now the truth was painfully clear. None of that mattered anymore. What kind of world would it be without humility, respect, and the ability to pause before judging someone's worth? She recalled moments she had overlooked without a second thought. Passengers asked to switch seats because they felt uncomfortable. People were questioned for dressing too casually in business class. The family was silent as they were treated like intruders. She had never hit anyone, never shouted at anyone, but she made them feel small. She made them feel inferior. And now the industry she had devoted her life to, the place where she once felt powerful, respected, and in control, had slammed the door shut in her face. Clara instinctively reached for her badge, but then she remembered it was no longer pinned to her uniform. It was in the trash bin behind her seat. She couldn't wear it anymore. She glanced at the seat beside her. Her wine glass was tipped over with a bold, cruel message printed on it. She picked it up, stared at it for a moment, then opened the car door, stepped out into the cold night, and tossed it into a nearby trash can without hesitation. The sound of shattered glass echoed off the metal walls. It was a sharper, more final sound than she expected. She leaned against the car and looked up at the night sky. Planes cut across the sky above their distant blinking lights fading away. Somewhere up there, another crew was serving drinks, adjusting seatbelts, preparing to land. Somewhere, maybe another family was traveling. Maybe another gate agent would make a decision just like hers. Or maybe not. Maybe someone saw that video. Maybe someone read the comments. Maybe someone paused before speaking too quickly, before letting bias become routine. Maybe someone would learn from her failure. And that was the only thing Clara thought mattered. Not her career, not her reputation, not her record, but whether someone somewhere could look at what she did and say, "I won't be like her." Her record, but whether someone somewhere could look at what she did and say, "I won't be like her." She sat back in the car, started the engine this time, and let it idle. The headlights cut through the empty space, shining bright on the pavement. She placed her hands on the wheel but didn't drive yet. No plan, no direction, just the road ahead, and the painful truth that sometimes the greatest losses aren't ones you cause. They're the things you throw away yourself because you believed you were untouchable until someone showed you that you never were. The next morning, the world moved forward. News updated with fresh headlines. The airport buzzed with daily routine. Planes took off, passengers boarded, and the crew completed their checklist without missing a detail. But for Clara, time now moved differently, slower, heavier, more real. She hadn't slept. Her phone lay face down on the bedside table, silent for a long time. She stopped reading comments and stopped answering messages that weren't really about support. They were just sick curiosity disguised as concern. The airline had revoked her access to all portals. Her email was disabled. Her uniform, once neatly pressed and cared for, now hung oddly on the door or doorknobs in the hallway as if it belonged to a stranger. She wandered around her apartment, pacing aimlessly. The walls were covered with framed photos from layovers, crew dinners, graduation ceremonies, smiling faces, and proud poses. But now each frame felt less like a celebration and more like a collection of moments held captive by someone she no longer recognized. She stopped in front of one picture. This photo was taken in her 5th year. She wore her uniform, standing tall beside a captain on the runway, the plane lit up behind them. Behind them, she looked confident and steady. She remembered thinking at the time, "I made it." But really, what had she made? A 12-year career ended in 12 seconds. Not because of a passenger, not because of a family, but because of a habit, a mindset that power came with the right to decide who deserved it. She poured herself a cup of coffee. Silence filled the apartment. The TV stayed off and the curtains were only slightly drawn. Outside, life went on, but inside, the memory of that flight wouldn't leave her. She couldn't forget her daughter's confused eyes looking up and asking, "Why aren't we allowed in?" Or the quiet grace of the mother who never raised her voice not once. Or the son standing still more serious than his age, listening to every word. And above all, the father Stephen, calm, composed, steady. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to get angry. He simply acted. He made a call. And in doing so, he didn't just change her fate. He revealed it. Clara remembered the last moment as she passed, him at the jet bridge escorted like a criminal. He didn't smile. He wasn't smug. He just looked at her calm and quiet as if he wasn't angry. She felt as if he was just disappointed. And that disappointment hurt more than anything else. She opened her laptop and instinctively typed into the airline crew login portal but got an error. Access denied. Employee ID not found. Her throat tightened. She couldn't change what had already happened. Without an appeal, there was no second chance. She opened a blank document. No plan, no purpose, just an urge. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a long moment. She paused, took a breath, and then kept going. You don't know me beyond a few terrible minutes, but now I realize that I never really saw you clearly. I didn't see the father trying to protect his family. I didn't see the mother holding her daughter's hand. I didn't see the boy standing there seeming calmer than me. I saw something else because I was trained in this field over and over, but mostly because I did it myself. She paused again and continued. I was wrong and I deserve whatever consequences come. But I want to say this because no one forced me, because sometimes the deepest lessons come from the people we try to ignore. You showed the world what true strength looks like. Quiet, unshakable strength. I hope your children grow up remembering that moment, not as humiliation, but as a reminder of how dignity wins, even when the world tries to deny it a place. She hit save, but didn't send it. She didn't know where to send it. Maybe she felt unworthy, but she needed to write it. She closed her laptop, sat down, and felt the weight of it all. Not out of pity, not for salvation, just because it was the truth. Sarah Coleman's fall didn't make a big noise. There was nothing dramatic. It happened slowly, quietly, and sharply in real time, not exposed by scandal, but by a single moment that held her accountable. And those who changed everything didn't shout, didn't argue, didn't even speak up. They just stood where they had the right to stand and waited. And now the world has seen the truth. It's not just about a flight attendant, but about a silent culture of bias hiding behind uniforms and policies. Just one man's phone call, and the plane didn't stop. It opened eyes. For Sarah Coleman, that was the moment everything finally fell into place. If this story touched you, please, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories soon. The story of Clara and the Moore family teaches us that prejudice and disrespect can lead to tragic consequences, while calmness and dignity bring true strength. Clara, by misjudging the Moore family based on their appearance, lost her career, reputation, and status. In contrast, the Moore family, with their calmness and a simple call for justice, not only stood up for their rights, but also exposed a bigger problem, the bias hidden in behavior and policy. Don't judge others based on looks or personal bias. Respect for everyone, regardless of background or circumstances, is the foundation of a fair society. Humility and the ability to admit mistakes are key to personal growth and avoiding repeating those mistakes. In today's American society, issues of racism and prejudice remain a major challenge. Similar incidents, whether in aviation, the workplace, or everyday life, often show up on social media, holding individuals and organizations accountable. This story is a reminder that every action, no matter how small, can have a big impact, especially when technology quickly records and spreads information. In your personal life, listen and verify information before jumping to conclusions. At work, treat your colleagues and customers fairly. As a member of the community, speak out against injustice calmly but firmly. By practicing respect and humility, we can build a more inclusive society that reflects the modern values of America. Through humility, we can create a more inclusive society that aligns with the modern values of the United States.